I need a shave, and whoa, is that another Skyward Sword trailer? Well, hey there guys, I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaDungeon.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. Our first question comes from Athenian200. What do you think of the new Skyward Sword trailer? Well, I think it's a pretty good trailer. I mean, you know, it's mostly like a recut or perhaps just new clips of the same old things that, you know, they've shown before. But it's a good trailer, they do it well, and there's some pretty nice little details in there. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of weird things that my good friend Locke, who is excellent with the symbols and stuff in the Zelda series, will catch that I'd never notice at all. But, there is some new stuff I did notice. For example, there's a couple really nice shots of Skyloft, and the town just looks gorgeous. I noticed there's some kind of crazy platform in the hand of the goddess statue in Skyloft as well. And they showed a couple of other things, nothing really important, except they showed a Goron. And I recently, I think it was just last mailbag, stated that I think there's some doubt on Volvagia appearing in Skyward Sword because there's no Gorons. And, well, with the Gorons here, I think I can almost guarantee we'll have Volvagia, and I also think it can guarantee we'll have the Zoras too, which I also think guarantees Lord Jabu-Jabu, and if Volvagia and Lord Jabu-Jabu are there, I think that kind of guarantees the Deku Tree. So, yeah, that's my assessment from the new trailer. Fillet O. Gotti asks, given the similarities between Death Mountain and Dragon Roost Island, do you really think that Volvagia and Valoo have nothing to do with each other? Well, I don't think they have nothing to do with each other. To answer the question about the mountain and the island, I actually think they're the same freaking thing. I think there's no reason to not come to that conclusion, particularly because it's a volcano, it has the ring and everything, no other mountain, well, okay, fine, but it has, I think it's supposed to be Death Mountain. I think that there's very little to say otherwise. And, as for Valoo and Volvagia, I blatantly think Valoo is a reference to Volvagia. There's just too much to say he's not. He was. He was like a spiritual successor to Volvagia, but I don't think he's actually a related entity in the world, in the story. But he was definitely like a spiritual successor to Volvagia. I don't think there's any denying that. Hylian Musician asks, what do you think of the graphics and art style of Skyward Sword? Also, what would be your favorite art style in the series? Oddly enough, my answer to both is somewhat related, because my favorite art style of the series is actually Skyward Sword's. I guess I'd have to see how they fully implement it throughout the entire game, but, you know, from what we've seen, it's gorgeous, and I think it's my favorite. What I think of it is simply that I think it's a great combination of serious elements of the series, some scary stuff, some serious looking characters, and the colorful, like, whimsy of the cell shading style, and it combines into sort of a bright anime look almost, and I think it's very fitting for the series. And while other games have had the anime look, I think Skyward Sword brings this beautiful, almost like painted style to it. I think it just looks beautiful, and it's my favorite art style of the series. Be sure to tell me what your guys' favorite art style of the series and what you think of Skyward Swords in the comments. Rafaela asks, I would like to know, what do you think about people saying that the graphics of Skyward Sword are bad? Well, there's two things I think this could be referring to. There's the people who said the actual graphical quality is bad, and I think this was particularly during the first showing of Skyward Sword, at which point I think there was supposed to be some actual flaws in the graphics that the Wii is capable of doing better, at which point that's just, they were kind of bad, though I believe they've refined that, and I never noticed any major problems. I've always thought it looked pretty great from the start, and I think most of those complaints have melted away. Then there's people who talk about the art style, and really there's nothing that can be done about that. I already established I think it's the most gorgeous, and I think it's in tune with what the series has kind of always been and is kind of supposed to be, you know, artistically. But there's always going to be people who don't like a certain style, and there's nothing you can do about that because people are never going to agree 100% on everything. There's always going to be people that disagree with something, and, you know, that's just how it is. It just doesn't appeal to them, and there's nothing wrong with that. These are probably some of the people who thought Twilight Princess was a really great-looking game, but not necessarily, you know, it's just a matter of opinion. Huckleberry Flynn asks, in the most recent issue of GameInformer, they had an article on Skyward Sword. In it, they mentioned the boss fight demo against Ghirahim, but they mentioned that he is a ghostly, skinny female. Yet in everything I've seen on the site of Zelda Dungeon, you have made it clear that Ghirahim is a male. Which one is it, and why, if so, is his gender misstated in the GameInformer magazine? Well, I haven't gotten that issue yet, so I haven't seen it myself, though it is vaguely possible they're joking. They have a lot of humor in GameInformer, and so it's hard to say. That said, I think it's fairly easy to mistake him for a female because he is a little effeminate, although I'll defend to my grave that what we've seen of him so far, he's got a fairly manly persona and personality. He just has that kind of fancy, effeminate appearance and whatnot. But he's definitely a male. He's got a male body, I mean, if you look close enough. He's definitely male. There's no denying that. I think Nintendo's pretty much stated that. And other than that, yeah, he's a dude. So, yeah. 147 Light asks, do you think Miyamoto was kidding when he said if Skyward Sword doesn't top Ocarina of Time, it will be the end of Zelda? I think he was partially kidding. I think he was probably kidding a little bit, making a joke out of it, being a fun guy, like he always is. But at the same time, I think he might have some vague seriousness to that. But I don't think that means anything towards the end of Zelda, because they're never going... I mean, Nintendo, despite what Miyamoto may or may not want to do after Skyward Sword, Nintendo isn't going to agree with him if he wants to end Zelda. I've seen many cases of a developer who was originally in charge of a series, particularly with the Mega Man X storyline, in which the original developer wanted to stop, and then the company made him keep going because it was making the money. And I think that would happen with Zelda. I Am the Few Shadows asks, I have always been disgusted when someone has stated that the Zelda series is dying, or that in a few years none of us will even remember what it is. What's your opinion on Zelda's long-term future as a series? Do you think that the series is going downhill? Well, I've discussed before that I think some aspects of the recent Zelda series have kind of moved away from what I think defines what the series should be, like exploration or, the whimsy and, friendliness and whatnot. But I think that, all of my real doubts about the recent Zelda games have kind of dissipated with what we know of Skyward Sword so far, so I'm not worried about that. As for the long-term future, as I've discussed, I mean, really, as long as people like Zelda and like where Zelda's going, there's always going to be games. As long as it's financially successful, there's no way Nintendo is going to drop it. Granted, that probably will happen sometime in the future, but it's not in the foreseeable future, and it'll be probably pretty obvious when it is going to happen. And it will be time, and no one will really mind that much. I mean, as long as they're doing the right things to appeal to the fans, which is probably going to be netting the right balance of their old ideas that always appealed to people and the new ideas that keep drawing people to the series and making them coming back, as long as they do that, there's always going to be Zelda. Yamiya Lex 224 asks, do you think as more games come out it will make the timeline easier or harder to figure out, since Skyward Sword is before Ocarina of Time? I don't think Skyward Sword's timeline placement is going to change things too much. I think it's going to clarify a lot of things about Ocarina of Time, and it may about other aspects of the series, but I don't think it's going to change a lot, redefine a lot. That said, Aonuma has indicated that he wants to clarify the timeline. I believe it was him that said that anyway, and it's likely that if that's true, as more games come out, he's going to clarify things more bit by bit. But I don't know if that's actually going to stick, and if it will or not. It's a time will tell kind of scenario. Either way, the timeline is always going to be an odd issue, I think. Mater Sword asks, why do you think Nintendo has been so reluctant to make an adult-oriented Zelda game? Well, I think the answer is quite simply that's not what Zelda is. Now, you could argue that they could easily do it and it would work well, but it doesn't change the fact that that's never been what Zelda's about. Zelda always started as a whimsical, family-friendly, if still appealing to adults, fantasy title. Now, I mean, it's like, you don't take Gears of War and think, oh, let's make a version of Gears of War for kids. And you don't take Sesame Street and say, let's make a gritty first-person shooter based on Sesame Street. You don't take something that's generally always been one way and is intended to be that way and change it so it's something completely different for a completely different audience. You make something one way, and you make it for its audience. And I think that's how Zelda should stay. I mean, there's no reason for it to change, because it's still appealing to adults. Austin Fox 33 asks, so we've seen what the 3DS can do with Ocarina of Time 3D. What do you think the 3DS will bring to the series? More remakes, the same style of the game we saw with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks? Or something new entirely? I want something new entirely, and I think it's the most probable. I think the only reason that we won't get that is if fans are clamoring for remakes like they've been. I don't think it's going to be the DS titles just because I think they're done with that style, at least for now. If people are clamoring for remakes, I think Nintendo will do it, but I don't think Nintendo should be spending the time and energy on that, even if they hire another company to do it, simply because the 3DS, the time and energy put into making Zelda games for the 3DS should be put into new ideas, new concepts, and exploring the 3DS hardware. I really think there's no reason to remake any of the other games right now, I mean, other than Ocarina of Time, which was a very well-renowned game. It was legendary, it's the best Zelda game, etc., at least according to most people. And, you know, there was a good reason to make a remake. There isn't for any other Zelda game, really, so I would just like to see new stuff, and I think Nintendo, for the most part, is probably going to do that. Alright, guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the email address or contact page in the description, and I'll see you guys later.